Did the New York Military Academy do that for you, or were you always like that?
I think, and maybe this is a part of the book and what's happening, I think that people tend to be what they are. If people really have it or they don't have it.
People tend to be what they are. One of the most enduring television personalities, some might call him the father of daytime talk shows, interviewed Donald Trump 30 years ago, just after the release of The Art of the Deal. And joining me now is the great Phil Donahue.
I look like I just made my first communion.
Well, I'm both excited and intimidated, so thank you for being here. It has been a real, dream come true to get you on the show. But I want to ask you about that interview. So you interviewed Donald Trump in 1987.
He was on the show 3 times.
He was on the show 3 times. But this interview came in a very interesting year, in my view, in Donald Trump's life. He was really pushing the Reagan administration to make him some sort of Russian ambassador. He styled himself a potential future president. When you spoke to him back then, did you see a potential future president? Someone in your audience even asked.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Did you think he could run?
Oh, not even in a million years. Well, who did?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was a hot dog. And I kind of gave him a little stiff arm. I said on that interview, I said, I think I like your father better than you. But he held up all right. I wasn't nasty or mean. But he reached out. He worked hard he collected celebrities and made a lot of noise and got his name on a lot of buildings.
Yep.
And where were we when that happened?
Yeah.
I mean, why didn't you think of that, Joy?
Well, it's interesting because I feel that when people say, well, Donald Trump has changed so much, to me, he seems the same. If you go back to the 80s and you listen to him talk to him, you listen to him talk now, he's sort of the same guy. And one of the ways he's the same is that he did have this emphasis, and you talked to him about loyalty. I want to play another clip of it, and this is about Donald Trump's loyalty, and this was a question you asked him about Roy Cohn, the infamous Roy Cohn, being his lawyer during that federal case that the Nixon administration brought for racial discrimination in his father's buildings. Take a listen.
Loyal.
Exactly.
And loyalty is a great trait. In my opinion, it's a great trait. It's a trait that maybe can cause problems, but it's also a great trait.
Right.
So now you see this guy demanding loyalty from Jim Comey, demanding loyalty, his son essentially trying to take the fall for him. What do you make of it?
Same old.
Yeah.
He's very, and he can't handle, obviously, anyone who disagrees.
Right.
How about the cabinet meeting where everybody, like bobbleheads, am I great? Am I great? Yes, you are.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
yeah.
icky. I mean, anybody who was capable of that and didn't see the horror of demanding this kind of public proclamations of loyalty and just total fidelity to the king.
Yeah. And, one of the things, that I guess the media missed during the campaign that you had to sort of be a Trump supporter to get is that he did, even back in the 1980s, make this appeal to a certain kind of American who feels put upon by foreigners, put upon by, people of color, whatever it is they're put upon by. And this is Donald Trump back in 1987 talking about Japan and other countries ripping off the country. Take a listen.
Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, they're ripping off this country, and I don't like seeing it. Other countries have to pay us for the services we're rendering, or this country is going to go right down the tubes.
That is no different than his campaign appeal. It's no different.
And that's a variation on the theme that I think earned him so much voting power, enough to become president. He would go to these, I wondered who were these people under the, they raised when he walks out in the big rallies, and they have their iPhones up here, taking his picture, and you can see the back. Who were these people? And I, slow learner that I am, and I think mainstream elite media, as he would say, also missed this story. These were people who work hard, aren't sure their company isn't going to be sold. Kids can't get a job. They're home watching ESPN. They can't get the minimum wage raised beyond $10 an hour. And he comes out in that rally, clapping, and he says, "You're being ripped off." And these people said, "Yes!" And that was what put him in the White House. And I think the so-called, as he would call it, mainstream media largely missed that story.
Yeah.
Not Bernie, but most of the mainstream media really didn't get that.
And now that everyone's caught up and realized that, oh yeah, he definitely has a strong appeal to them, do you think there's anything that could break Trump voters from him? There's a recent piece out in which a Trump voter says, well, I guess if he killed someone in cold blood, I'd change my mind.
I mean, it's all, well, he can shoot a gun down Fifth Avenue, right?
Yeah, and get away with it. It seems like
and all of a sudden we got a crotch grabber for a president.
Yeah.
This is the darkest political moment in American history. Who's going to argue that?
And I'm wondering too, because one of the things about that period in the 80s was there was a certain sort of Dallas and dynasty culture. There was this sort of love of celebrity. The Reagan sort of gave off that era. And Donald Trump, this is Donald Trump also in your interview talking about his book sales, because The Art of the Deal had come out, which Tony Schwartz actually wrote, but that he took credit for. This is Donald Trump talking about his book sales.
The front page of the Wall Street Journal today tells us that they're printing 150,000 copies. Tweaked your cheek a bit. You said there were 200. Exaggerating, Mr. Hype.
No, I'll tell you truthfully, I thought it was 200, and I think it will be 200, but I'm not sure what it is. I don't know what it is exactly. It's 150 to 200,000. I guess.
Hyping and lying, two things that, again, have also not changed. Do you think deep down that maybe in the id of a lot of Americans, they kind of like a hype man, they kind of like a cad?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's an antidote to what they see as the pomposity of mainstream media, people on television. They know stuff you don't know, and they're fed up with it. And we're not talking about them. Pete, his name is Buttigieg. He's the mayor of South Bend, Indiana.
Pete Buttigieg.
Buttigieg, thank you. He is saying, my constituents are saying, what about me?
Well, but this is the question I have whenever I hear that. Don't we talk about these folks all the time? There have been so many stories of this particular Trump voter staring soulfully out a window that I think you could print an entire thick New York Times of just that picture.
Yes.
We talk about them every day. There are polls about them every week. We're constantly talking about these people. How can they feel not talked about? We talk about them every day.
Well, this is a hard point to make because it is true. Not everything sucks. I mean, there are, I've had Howard Stern on my show, so you watch my language. It is true. There's a lot of good work going on, and not all the media deserves to be criticized. I see these women in Iraq and Afghanistan with the helmets, and I think, holy cow, what if their parents are watching? Come home, honey. Daddy will get you a job at Starbucks. And it is true. It wasn't totally ignored. But it wasn't hit with all the same graphics and computer animation. Trump, 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 Trump was such a magnet that I think they were overlooked. And I think they have a right to say, what about me? Because I don't think media dug deep enough to see the pain out there, the broken hearts, the disappointments, the people who believed in America, went to church every Sunday, and sang in the choir, and I think they were ignored. I just do.
I have one last question, because your interview took place the same year that Donald Trump took out this full-page ad in the New York Times, Boston Globe, and other places. The top of the ad says, "There's nothing wrong with America's foreign defense policy that a little backbone can't cure." It was an open letter slamming Ronald Reagan, essentially, but also putting forward this very pro-Russia line, even back then. What do you make of the fact that you now have a significant share of Republicans who are okay with an American presidential candidate colluding with Russia? What do you make of that?
I think he's Elvis. I don't think they will tolerate, many of the base will not tolerate a criticism of him. I mean, if he can talk like to Billy, when he got off the bus.
Billy Bush, yeah.
Billy Bush. If he can talk that way, if they accept that.
Yeah.
And also, this is distant from them. This doesn't speak to their heart. And I think, honestly, I don't think he can be impeached right now. I think it's too dangerous for a member of Congress to vote for impeachment and upset a significant number of his own constituency.
Yeah.
It's a third rail. He could risk his own reelection.
Yeah. Well, Phil Donahue, it is such a treat to talk to you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Hopefully we can lure you back. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And up next, why Donald Trump's latest visit to his golf course may be his most controversial yet. Details coming up.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.